Hi, I'm Laura. I'm the communications manager and a creative contributor here at the Susie Quilts blog. I'm coming to you today from my sewing room where I have very neatly organized all of my fabric, as you can see behind me. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about strategies to organize your own fabric stash today. It might seem like a really big task, might seem like something that is a time investment that you don't want to do. You want to get right to quilting, and I understand that. But by breaking it down into a few simple folding techniques, you can really make a big improvement to how your fabric is stored and to how you can retrieve it and interact with it while you're making a quilt. So we're going to talk about folding 3 different cuts of fabric. First, fat quarters. You probably have a lot of those. Second, half yards. And third, we're going to talk about small yardage cuts, 1 to 3 yards of fabric. After that, we really hope that you feel inspired to organize your own fabric storage and really make it work for you in a better way as you're making your quilts. So let's get started. So we're going to start with fat quarters. This is a really common, popular length of fabric. I got all of these at different fabric shops, online shops or local quilt shops, and you can see that they are all folded differently. Every shop and every fabric company has a different way that they like to fold fat quarters. For me, a pile like this is kind of stressful though. These can very easily become untidy. They're not all folded all the way, closed, and they're different sizes, so it becomes difficult to see how much fabric I have because they just all look so different when they're on my shelf. So, you can see this fabric shop folded. There's neatly, but you can still see the raw edges peeking out the sides, and you can see how this can come apart on your storage really easily too. This is a remnant, a scrap of a half yard that I trimmed down to be a 1/4 yard to go into my storage, unfolded, sort of haphazardly put back together. These 2 I ordered from online quilt shops, and so you can see it's really common when you order from online quilt shops that they won't fold your fat quarters. They'll just all come unfolded. And that can end up looking a little messy on your shelf. This one here came in a fat quarter bundle. So it's very tidy, but still doesn't have the tidy tuck in it, which I'm going to show you how to do. And these 2 are folded really similarly by different people, but you can see that they're still a very different size too. So this is how I like to fold my fat quarters. It's a very tidy little square. You can see when you look at the sides, you can't see any raw edges or selvage edges. And you have this tidy tuck right here that keeps the whole thing nice and neat and closed. No raw edges, easy to retrieve. Let me show you how to do that too. I store my fat quarters in plastic containers like this. So I store them by color. So here's my neutrals and a couple other special ones that I like to keep aside. And if I need to pull a fat quarter out of here to try it out for a quilt, it's super easy. I can just say, okay, this is one of my favorite fabrics. I want to see if it's going to work in this quilt. Took it right out, didn't mess up any of the other fat quarters, can take it away, play with it for a while. If I change my mind and I don't want to use it, it's really easy to just slide right back in, right where it belongs. Here is how I do a very tidy fold for my fat quarter. You start with a selvage edge facing you. So here's my selvage edge. It's always going to be either this sort of frayed side with little perforated holes in it, or it will be like this, where it has information about the fabric line on it. This one's called Golden Hour. So you're going to start with that facing you. And this isn't a square piece of fabric, it's a rectangle. So you have this facing you, so the long lines are on the side, and then it's narrow on the top and the bottom. So you're going to fold it in half first. And then the other thing that I should mention before we get too much farther is if your fabric is wrinkled like this, it really doesn't matter. a lot of people, they don't want to spend a lot of time organizing their fabric stash, and that's understandable. You want to get right to quilting. To me, organization helps me quilt better. So investing the time in doing these folds is really important to me. But if you think that you have to press every single fat quarter that you buy in order to do this, you don't. You're not going to see these creases in this magic fold. So don't worry about any creases that are on it. So first we're going to grab it by the middle here. We're going to fold it in half. Then we're going to fold these two ends in to meet at the center here. We're going to fold it in half one more time. And then you still have your selvage edge facing you. And this is, you can see it's got raw edges and the selvage edge in it, but this side is neatly folded. This is a really nice side. So what we're going to do is flip it around, and we're going to fold this neat side up about 2/3 of the way. This doesn't have to be super precise, but if you want to measure it, you can always grab another fat quarter that you folded and say, all right, that's just a little bigger than the one I pulled from my storage. So I just made it a little smaller. Now you're going to do the tidy tuck, which is really what makes this my favorite way to fold fat quarters. I think the perfect way to fold fat quarters. So you've got a few layers of folded fabric on this side. If you lift up the first one, you have a little pocket here. You're going to take your messy edge, your selvage edge, and you're going to pop it right into there. And then I usually need to tug up on these two sides, and then it's perfect. Flip it over, you got a nice, neat square. Yards, and I fold half yards a little bit differently than fat quarters, and that's for 3 reasons. The first is the half yard has a little more weight to it, and I find that it can stay nice and tidy without needing the tidy tuck, which means you can do this a little quicker. The second is I tend to have fewer half yard cuts than fat quarters, which means that I can be a little less picky about how they look in my fabric storage. And the third reason is because they look different. They're a different size, the way that I fold half yard cuts from fat quarters, and that means that I can automatically look at my fabric storage and tell how much I have of that cut. So let's take a look at that difference. Here is a fat quarter. It's got my tidy tuck in the back, nice small little square. This is what happens when you try to fold a half yard into the tidy tuck system. That's something that you can do. You just have to do a little bit of a different tactic in the first step. You fold it over twice in the first step so that it's the correct dimensions. But it's a little bulky. I don't know if you can tell, but it becomes really difficult to get the tuck in there the bigger your fabric is. So this isn't my favorite way to fold a half yard, but you can see the difference between these right away. When I look at my storage, I can say, okay, I have a fat quarter of this print and I have a half yard of this print. I'll show you that in my storage containers really quick. All right, here is my fat quarter storage container. And here is one of my half yard cut containers. So you can see that there's always a little bit of space around the fat quarters, but the half yards take up the entire width of my storage container. So it's a very easy visual cue for me when I'm pulling fabric to make a quilt. All right, let's put these aside. Oh, they're heavy. They're heavy. I have too much fabric. Or never enough. I don't know. You tell me. Okay, so yeah, so these are already neatly folded, really beautiful combo of fabrics that I love. So we're gonna pull this other beautiful combo of fabrics that I love. These wovens that I just got, they're so pretty. And I'm gonna show you how we fold these. So, which one? Let's do this one. This is nice. Okay, so when you get a half yard, like I showed you before, it goes from the selvage to the selvage. So it's long and it's wide. So we're gonna start out the same way that we started out with our fat quarter. We're gonna grab the middle, assuming that it's already folded. You should have this the way that you get it off the bolt. It's already got a fold up at the top here. Leave that fold in place. That's important. And when you get these at a store or from an online fabric shop, they're almost never going to come folded in a neat and tidy way. This is a longer cut, and they're just usually going to give it to you like this, or maybe just sort of fold it up like this, like how it was before. So in order to get it looking a little neater, you're going to fold it in half first, and then you're going to fold it in half again. And that means that there are 3 folds so far, right? So you have the fold from when it came off your bolt, that's in the center at the top. You have this fold to the middle, and then you have this fold to the middle. And these are all, you know, if you grew up with the hot dog versus hamburger style of folding, all of these are the hot dog style folding. And then because you're not doing the tidy tuck, you're just gonna twist it around that way. And then you're still gonna see, most often, you're still gonna see a little bit of a crease here. I'm not sure how visible it is. You're gonna fold your bottom end up to about the middle. There's a crease, or you're just gonna find the middle. And then you're just gonna fold that 2 more times. And there you go. You got a great little rectangle of fabric there. And because it's a heftier weight, it's gonna stay really nice and tidy. Fabric length we're going to talk about is yardage. I like to make what I call mini bolts out of anything from 1 yards to 3 yards of fabric. Personally, I think if you have yardage that's more than 3 yards, you should leave it on the bolt. It's the best way to store it. It's very heavy, and this system is not going to be very successful. If you bought your yardage at a fabric shop, you can often ask them for a leftover bolt, or to even keep the bolt that you're purchasing it off of, if you're buying enough of it. Like if you're buying enough to make a quilt back, the shop might just give you the bolt. So these are some mini bolts. They sit on my shelf. Let's see, like this, sort of neatly arranged. I have them stacked on my shelf basically like how they would be in a fabric shop. So they look like this to me. I can pull them off my shelf really easily when I'm quilting. And I'm going to show you how I like to fold these today. All right, so there are 2 different types of boards that you can get to make your mini quilts. Well, 2 different common types. There's a lot of other types. Right here we have a comic book board, and this is a magazine board. When you're buying these, you know, you can get them on the internet. The most important thing to look for is that they're acid-free. Not all acid-free materials are created equal by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm hoping to write a blog post in the future about what acid-free really means and how to look for good materials for very long-term preservation. But for short-term preservation, comic book board or magazine board that's labeled acid-free, that's going to be just fine. This is not what you want to put like great grandma Biddy's quilt on, because that's gonna probably harm it in the long run. But you should be using your fabric stash. So these are really excellent. So you can see they come in 2 sizes. The smaller one is the comic book board. Bigger one is the magazine board. Really doesn't matter which size you pick, as long as you're consistent with it so that everything looks tidy on your shelf. I'm gonna do the magazine board today. So there's that. I'm gonna put it aside because I do want to show you the difference in how they look. So this print is on a comic book board, and this linen behind it is on a magazine board. These are also two larger cuts of fabric. I think this is about 1.5 yards, maybe it's 2 yards. I used a little bit of it, so I'm not sure anymore. But you can see it's already getting kind of bulky. This is about as bulky as you want to get. So it's, it's an awful lot of fabric folded in there. And you can see that the board is kind of flimsy underneath it. So going anything over 3 yards, I really wouldn't do for this system. All right, so we're gonna get this back and we're gonna fold this yard of fabric onto it. I got this fabric recently to make a pillowcase for my daughter, who is not old enough to use a pillow yet. And so because of that, I'm gonna put it in storage until she is more than 8 months old. And then she gets a special pillow out of this. I really can't wait because I think it's gonna be really cute. So this one is really simple. You're gonna keep this fold from where it's on the bolt. Lay it out flat. Then you're gonna fold it over once, hot dog style, which basically is like the long way instead of the short, more square way. So you folded it over hot dog style. When we talked about fat quarters and half yards, we didn't really talk about the orientation of the selvage, and that's because it didn't really matter too much for either of those cuts. For making your mini bolts, it is a little neater if you make sure at this point that your selvage edge is facing you and your folded edge is facing the surface that you're using for folding. You'll see why in a second. So then you get your magazine board or your comic book board. There's also a board that that is sold specifically for quilters to make mini bolts. I have not tried it yet. I would love to someday. These are just what I had years ago when I started making these mini bolts. They're still working okay for me. So investing a lot of money into another system wasn't something that I wanted to do. But you can look for those mini bolt boards for quilters if you would like. Those are made out of a really great material. Okay, so take my board, whether it's a magazine board or a comic book board. I like to have just a few inches that folds over the board at first. So I lay it on my fabric, fold it over just a few inches, and then you're just gonna roll it. Just gonna fold it until you get to the end of your cut. 2, 3. So pretty short when you're doing just 1 yard. This can be really time consuming when you're doing 3 yards in order to get that second fold going really nicely. But for a 1 yard cut, this is really nice. It's a great way to store it vertically on your shelf and be able to pull it out just like you would at a fabric shop. So there you have it. It's that easy to get started organizing your fabric stash just by using these techniques to fold cuts of fabric that I know you have in your fabric stash. Let us know if you are going to start organizing your fabric after watching this. Tell us in the comments and let us know what your big organization concerns are in your own sewing space. We might go over that in a future organization blog post. But for now, go grab a snack, put on an audiobook, put on a podcast, your favorite album, close the door to your sewing room, and have fun organizing your fabric.